This week on CNBC Sport the Podcast, Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith shares his perspective on the NBA's new anti-tanking draft modifications.
I think all of us are taking a step back going, you know what, we've seen a shift kind of in the tone within the ownership going, hey, we all believe we've got to fix this.
Plus, some insight into who the Jazz may take with the number 2 overall pick, and if drafting a player with ties to Utah is meaningful to him, and why he thinks owning 2 professional sports teams, the Jazz and the NHL's Mammoth, has led to synergies that have improved the performance of both. Plus, our monthly conversation with Rick Oro on the NBA's big TV rating success in year 1 of its new media deal. That's all coming up this week on CNBC Sports the Podcast. I am pleased to be joined by Ryan Smith, owner of the Utah Jazz and the Utah Mammoth, of course the NBA and the NHL teams out of Salt Lake City. Ryan, thank you for being here.
Hey, it's great to be back on, Alex.
You know, it's funny, in preparation for this conversation, I actually went back and was listening to a conversation that the two of us had right after you bought the team. Right, it was during COVID. I was talking to you from my house. And you, I imagine, were in your house at the time. And I want to start with something that we talked about in that conversation because I think it's a nice prelude into what you're thinking about real time, which is you now own the number 2 pick in the coming NBA draft for the Jazz. You're going to make a big franchise-altering selection there. At the time, you were pretty stoked about having a Utah Jazz team that had Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Derek Favors. You during the interview, you sort of made a point to name these guys, but and about less than 2 years later, none of those players were on the team anymore. So you made a decision as an owner that you needed to do an organizational reset. And in many ways, what we're about to go through now with the number 2 pick in this draft, though it's years later, is sort of the culmination of that decision. So my first question to you is, how did you decide to make that decision? What was it that told you, you know what, this is not the right group of guys for me to get over the hump with. We'd be better off resetting now.
Yeah, so first of all, coming in, I don't think anyone wants to start their tenure that way where you come in and you can see the enthusiasm. You know, I think I've been a fan of the Jazz my whole life, right? And we've been very, very close. And then typically the market tells you where you're at, right? You know, the playoffs will tell you where you're at. I think there's a couple teams in the playoffs this year that were bounced a little earlier than they thought. And that was a little bit the case of where we were. And it's really a decision that we have to make, which was, hey, do we want to keep going further down in assets? Because a lot of times where the cap is, where salaries are, financially or picks, you know, in order to get better, you got to go out and acquire more talent. And, you know, we were kind of faced with that dilemma, which was, hey, do you go out and try to scale up and go even more, or do you need to scale back? And, you know, we did the latter. And look, it's painful. I don't think any of the 10 owners this year wanted to go through that, or fan bases. But that being said, we're also in a league where, you know, you just said it, you know, the first couple picks in a draft, probably more than any sport, can really alter the trajectory of your franchise. And you know, that's where we sit now. And, you know, we made a big trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. We had a bunch of young guys that, you know, we drafted over the last couple of years in return for kind of making that decision with that dilemma. We received a lot of draft assets and we drafted, and now we're on the way up. And I think a lot of teams really have to go through this if they want to compete at the highest level. So
the NBA is in real time trying to push back to some degree on this concept, right? Of like, how do we, there's obviously a number of teams. In many ways, I think you guys were the poster child for it this past year, of a purposeful rebuild. In fact, you were fined $500,000 by the NBA for sitting 2 of your star players in the fourth quarter, where basically the league said, look, this is too egregious even for us. Now, at the time, I believe you said agree to disagree. But I'm curious now, we're at the end of the regular season. You guys got the number 2 pick, which was the kind of what you were gunning for. do you feel like A, you were still wrongfully fined, and B, that there actually is a problem here in terms of tanking that the league needs to address?
I think the league is addressing this, and we're having, I probably talked with the NBA, 6 or 7 times with our group. I know every team has. I think Adam's running a pretty good process here of letting everyone opine on, really how to go through what we just described. Like, how do you go through kind of tearing it down and rebuilding back up when there's so much emphasis and to be honest with you, so much to gain from being at the bottom of the draft and, or the top, depending on how you look at it. So, for us going forward, the question really becomes is, are we going to do flat odds so that anyone can win it? There became a little bit more incentive to just really not be in the middle. You either want to be competing at the highest level, and if there's an injury or, you don't feel like your team's in a spot or you're young, how do you kind of be on one side or the other? And that's what we've seen a lot of in the league. And so the good news is I think every plan we're looking at, I think everyone's going to have to agree to disagree at some part of this because it's never a perfect situation. It is a true marketplace. You've got teams, you've got players, and then you put the people in and things unexpectedly happen. And so I think that we're all going to go through and we're going to lock arms and say, hey, this is the best path forward. And I'm super optimistic. As I mentioned before, there's really not a league where one player changes the outcome or one lottery spot can change the outcome of a franchise. It's definitely different in hockey than it is in hoops. And but I'm super bullish, and I think the league's doing a pretty good job.
So again, in hindsight now, do you think the league was right to fine you?
I don't know. That's a tough question. We've debated that with each other quite a bit. I don't look at the fine as maybe the way the rest of people do. I think the fine is what it is. I mean, could they have fined us? Could they have fined 7 other teams? They did fine 2 of us. I think that their rationale was very much like, hey, we think we ended up winning the game one of the games we were fined on. But, in principle, I think they were right to come down pretty hard on the process. And you can argue that, this has been happening for years. You can argue that, how do you choose 1 or 2 teams? Are we being singled out? But I think all of us are taking a step back going, you know what? We've seen a shift kind of in the tone within the ownership going, hey, we all believe we've got to fix this.
You alluded to this fix. There is a proposal out now, which is this sort of 1, 2, 3 solution that the league has put out, which again, that's for if you're in the bottom 3 teams, then the odds are actually worse that you would get a top pick. And so in principle, from what you've seen, do you think that this is the right solution? Or is there something within this solution that you think still should be modified?
I think all of it's directionally correct, right? But I think that it depends on what we're solving for. I think, it's going to, every action has an adverse reaction. And I think you know what it's going to be, or you can kind of model this out or game theory out how it's all going to work. But once you put the teams in and you see this, I don't think anyone would have thought that, maybe the play-in game would have an adverse reaction. So I think that you kind of have to play it out. I think from what we can see so far, like the flat odds to me are probably the most or the largest change that we're going to have in this process where, the 14th pick or the 13th pick could jump all the way up to number 1. If you look this year, like who that could be, you're starting to get into the Dallas, the Golden State, like some of these teams that were right there maybe had one little injury and then they're able to do that. Well, what's the adverse reaction? Well, if you've got teams that for whatever reason might be in smaller markets, haven't been able to actually get out of the bottom of the league, how do they rebuild? Because there's also a lot, not as much free agency. So I think this is all on the table. I don't think what's being floated or what's being proposed is final. As I mentioned before, all of us feel like we're being heard. And I think that's the most important part of this. And it's also hard to manage from a league standpoint, but all the front offices are talking with the leagues. We're all submitting our proposal. I think the one thing they've said is, the length of these changes might not be as long and permanent. We might try a 3-year window to see how it goes. But I think we're going directionally in the right way to take the pressure off that top of the draft.
Another thing, when I was going back into that old conversation we had done 6 years ago or so, that we discussed was your passion at the time to specifically own the Utah Jazz, which you were from Utah. You grew up a Jazz fan. And so you had a chance to buy some other teams, and you sort of held out because your wife and kids were Jazz fans. Like it meant more to you. And I think there's an interesting parallel there right now, which is that you now own the number 2 pick, and there are 2 players in that consensus top 4 that have ties to Utah. Now, AJ DeBonsa may go number 1. You may not have a chance to get him. That's most mock drafts suggest he will go number 1. Of course, you could theoretically trade up and get him. And there's also Cameron Boozer, who's the son of Carlos Boozer, who was a Jazz player, then became a part of your front office. So my question to you is this. Is there something meaningful to you in selecting a player that has ties to the organization that goes beyond just the tape, just the college tape? Or are those things kind of too soft and fluffy, and in the end, they don't really mean anything?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit more of the latter, because whoever we bring in is going to have ties to Utah that are pretty strong, in the short term right away. Is there a little serendipity if one of those things happen to all fit together, where it's a double or a triple, where it's right there? That being said, we want to win a championship. I've got Austin Ainge leading this with Danny Ainge, and they're going to draft whoever they believe is going to put us closer to winning a championship with the guys that we already have. Utah's a special place. It's the largest small market that exists in the NBA. It's unique of everywhere else we see, where culturally, we have things here from, being able to fly anywhere in the world to, the tech ecosystem, to just wellness. And I think guys are coming and seeing that, and, it's pretty cool to be able to see that. I'm watching Donovan last night, who's got ties here, Sam Merrill, who grew up here. We've got ties everywhere. And so I think at some point that's probably less of the story. But if it does happen, even better.
You also own the Utah Mammoth, the NHL team, and you just mentioned in your answer about wellness. You are actually building a facility, correct, that both the Jazz and the Mammoth can participate in, which is unique, right? That both hockey and basketball at the professional level would be able to sort of participate within this facility. You can, I'm sure, explain it a lot better than I can.
Yeah, our ownership group, when we looked at bringing in hockey, we were sitting there going, okay, how many teams actually have both to play in the same building? And I'll tell you, like in business, and especially at tech, we're always looking for synergies. We're always looking for this 1 and 1 equals 3. I don't think I've ever seen a synergy quite as intact as having hockey and basketball play in the same arena every other night, where the hardwood and the ice just kind of flip back and forth with our fan base, sponsors, everything. And so as we thought about, kind of city building and what we wanted to do in Utah, we had to build a new practice facility for hockey. So we ended up buying a mall that's sitting on 110 acres right off the freeway just south of Salt Lake. And as we got into this, we said, wow, this is really cool. The community can be here. And we said, let's go put our basketball practice facility on the other side. And so really, As you come in, you go left if you're a hockey player, you go right if you're a basketball player, and then all of our corporate offices are actually in the middle with our venture fund. And last week we announced that we're building, and we partnered with Intermountain Healthcare to do a world-class medical facility. So if someone needs to get an MRI or they're going through rehab, we're going to have world-class doctors and our facility almost looking into the basketball. So it's all there connected. And there's really not anything like this that exists in sports. This is really SCG, which is our parent company. It's really our hub for sports, and everything is built with the community access is part of it. And it's pretty cool to see. I mean, we've sold out every single night for the community to come and use the ice after our hockey guys are on it. And it's inspiring to watch that. And we're trying to do a little similar with hoop. These facilities have historically been a little closed off, not wanting people to see in. And our players share everything anyways. So we're actually trying to bring this and make this more of a community asset.
For those that don't remember, the Arizona Coyotes became the Utah Mammoth. I know you grew up a big basketball fan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not believe you grew up a big hockey fan. So I'm curious.
I played a little roller hockey growing up, but to be honest with you, I've had to learn a lot.
So that was my question, which is, what have you learned as an owner that has allowed the team to have sort of immediate success? I mean, there's probably some sort of through line there.
Yeah, if you look back, we're 2 years before walking into a hotel ballroom in Phoenix, Arizona, and saying, "Hey, you've all been traded to Utah," and then scrambling to figure out, "Hey, how are we going to stand up an NHL team?" And it's really a daunting task because there wasn't really a lot of data that would show that hockey would work in Utah. We didn't quite have the junior programs to suggest this was a thing. We do have Olympic sports. There are 7 ski resorts within 25 minutes of Salt Lake, and the Olympics are coming back in 34. So that component of it was nice. But what the community did to rally around and accept and really meet us halfway in bringing this team here, that's really what drove the success, because our players landed and they're like, holy cow, like everyone's showing up. The arena's sold out every night. And I think that's something about Utah. Even the last couple of years during this harder time with hoops, our fans were there every night. I mean, the building was packed. And so I think that goes a long way. Without fans, it's tough to have success. And especially when it's, they're only showing up when our teams are winning. What's awesome about Utah is they're showing up regardless. And so that's a good foundation. And then just getting the guys here and having them experience Utah. We added quite a few pieces. We've extended our young core, and there's really nothing like kind of watching something without really the DNA behind us. We're kind of starting from scratch, new name, new brand, and kind of a fresh start. The first goal, the first win, the first playoff. We've become addicted to these firsts. And I think that's what's driving these guys. And they want more firsts. They keep wanting to high mark of where the organization can go.
Does that consistent fan support that you're talking about, even when sort of the underlying data may not have been there that would have suggested that hockey would be a huge hit in Utah, does that make you want to try to own a WNBA team?
Look, I come from tech, and people always ask, like, is Smith Entertainment Group, SCG, going to continue to expand? I don't know any other way. I mean, you're always building. And, it was that way with Qualtrics, where we just keep going. We're going to Europe. We're going to Asia. We're going to South America. We're expanding our product lines. I sit down often and we discuss as a leadership group, we discuss as an ownership group. I'm fortunate to have, some of my best friends on the planet who actually wrote their first check into Utah from Excel Partners, his partners, Ryan Sweeney and Bracha, and then a couple CEOs that we grew up with through the Excel family. Mike Cannon-Brooks at Atlassian, George Kurtz at CrowdStrike. These are people who we all operate the same way. And it's like, we're either building or we're not. And so the thesis in what's different this time is in tech, we're wanting to develop products that the whole world uses. I started in my basement and nothing was better when I'd walk into a company and they're like, hey, you know what? We changed the way we deal with our customers and our employees because of Qualtrics from the experience. This is even more than that. When you watch after a playoff win, these sweaters or jerseys of the Utah Mammoth flood the streets, honking, you're getting this euphoric reaction, like you've actually changed something or changed the community. So it's super addicting, and we want to do more of that.
Why did you decide to go in the other direction with soccer, right? Because you could have become the majority owner of the National Women's Soccer League team, the MLS team, and you said no. You decided to actually sell out of your stake there. What drove that decision?
Yeah, I think it was timing. We had just gotten hockey in, and we literally had 6 months to go digest this, and we kind of have this philosophy of going all in. If we're going to go all in, we're going to do it right. And soccer's one where you kind of need to be all in globally. Like it is all in. And I'll just be honest, I'm not as passionate about soccer as I am the other big four. And it's just, I don't know what else to say. I think going into sports to not go, just to expand and go into sports on things you're not passionate about, I think is a real mistake because, it's part of what makes it enjoyable. It's part of what makes you want to go work and spend hours on it. And in my mind, you can't really fake it. If I want to just invest in asset classes to grow it, I just go put more money in tech or do other things. But there's kind of this hand in glove that has to fit for me, and really being passionate. I'm super passionate about hoops. I am super passionate about hockey, and that means like I'm there, I'm showing up, I'm digging in, I'm going there, and just down the list, not that soccer isn't there, but there are other people that are way more passionate about soccer than I am, and that doesn't mean I couldn't get there. I just at the time really wasn't there for me as much.
I've got to ask you a local media question, because I know the Jazz were at the forefront of sort of trying to figure out a new way of approaching regional sports networks. You guys developed Jazz Plus, the subscription streaming service that allowed fans to pay like $20 a month or something like that to get all the games. Plus, you also struck a deal with local broadcast station to carry the Jazz games for free over the air. Do you think that is the basic platform, the template for what regional sports is going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years in the NBA? Or do you think the league has something else in mind that they want these teams to look like? Perhaps maybe some sort of all-in system where the league actually is the one that owns all the rights?
Yeah, so I'm on the media committee, so I probably shouldn't give too much of a view, but I'll just tell you holistically kind of how we all think about it. We think we've got one of the greatest products on the planet. And if you look at what going to Europe looks like, if you look what Africa is, we also look that, and this is, I'm switching to our local now, the viewing experience, there was a lot of anxiety around a historic Jazz fan the last 15 years of like, where am I going to get the game? The days are over where someone's sitting in their lazy boy recliner watching 2 hours straight through a game. Like, we are moving everywhere. It's not uncommon one night where I'm watching a game from my phone, my iPad, or my home in one sitting. And so you really need to divide how we think about viewership into the different cohorts of individuals or cluster them out. And so that's how we did this. We said, okay, my 80-year-old or 90-year-old grandmother, what's her viewing experience? What's the family viewing experience? What's a fan who's on the go? What's a fan who's traveling to a different state on business? And then there's also a geo. What's the southern Utah viewing experience, or Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana, who are actually close to us? And I literally wanted it to be like, hey, this concept of pull up a billboard on I-15 in Salt Lake City and say, this is how you watch the Jazz game. And it's literally like, pick an option for you. Choose your own adventure. And by the way, they're all interchangeable. Now, the problem with that through a lot of these contracts is there's channel conflict. If you're going to do this, you can't do YouTube. If you're doing here. And so we wanted to thread that needle as much as we could and incentivize that on local. Now, when you think about national, obviously we're in the first year of our new NBA contract. I think, I watched on Prime last night. I thought it was an awesome experience, right? I think what NBC's done with the NBA has been absolutely phenomenal. Being able to catch those games over air, pretty much if you have bunny ears on your TV, you can do that. And so I think we're looking at it, we're all watching the local media landscape, which is, hey, are we going for ubiquitous viewership? In our own market, we had 1.2 million people watching games. Well, we went to 6 million in a year. That's our footprint. Now, that doesn't mean 6 million people are watching every game, but that's our reach. And you ask yourself, which one's better? Taking a big check for $1 million? I'm in the business of growing the game. I'm always raising my hand and saying, hey, I want our game everywhere because we do have a ball that's this big, and that's a blessing. How do we get that out on a mobile experience?
And just to quickly follow up, do you think that is a team-by-team decision? Should it be up to each individual owner to decide what's more important, reach or maximizing the value of regional rights? Or should it be a unified league decision where all of these teams kind of have the same solution?
Well, right now, as it currently stands, it's team by team with a little bit of oversight or partnership with the leagues to make sure we don't go off and go through a one-way door that we can never get it back out of. And if you see that, myself, our group, if you see, what's gone on in Phoenix, very similar with Ishbia and his group. Ballmer did something a couple years back. And so I think that's worked out very well. Now, the question that you're asking really is in the future, are we going to go aggregate? I think we're all open, but you've got to check a couple different boxes, and one of those is reach, And so if I know that there's a lot of companies that would love to aggregate some of the big hyperscalers, everyone would love to see an aggregation.
ESPN,
they would love
Amazon,
to have that local.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
yes,
YouTube,
yes.
maybe.
There's no shortage. There's no shortage of the NBA product for demand, and I think that's a really good spot to be in. And what's required to go do this locally? What we've done in the past, we produce our own games, we sell our own spots, and we really control that experience. And our fans love it. So if we could turn that up on a national, I think it's only a plus for the league, but it takes time.
Last question, Ryan. What has surprised you most about being an owner of major professional sports teams?
That people really don't care that much about enterprise software. They're much more passionate about their sports. No, I think leadership principles are still the same. You're really, if I look back over 20 years at Qualtrics, we're building teams to do things and go climb hills that we didn't know we could climb. It's us against the world. No one's really going to help you out. It's a competitive environment. And so if you go into sports, it's very much the same. One of the surprising things is definitely how sports has become an asset class that everyone's kind of running to. So it's surprising in one way. The live experiences that people are running to is kind of not that surprising because it is the antithesis of AI, and people want to feel, people want to convene, people want to turn around after a goal or a clutch three-pointer and high-five everyone in their section. But it's crazy to kind of see it in real time. So I don't know how much we're just kind of blown away, but there are these micro trends that are surprising of what's kind of same as ever in business principles that carry over to, kind of what's new. Since I talked to you in COVID, I don't think we've had an event at the Delta Center that hasn't sold out, right? Which is pretty crazy when it comes to live events and experience and what people want to be a part of, both on the sporting side, entertainment. Also, what's become clear is that there's not an economic driver that exists for cities like sports, and where, every urban core in the US right now is struggling. Every single one. What sports does to that core is, there's really not a comparison. There's not a, hey, Google coming and opening up in downtown. There's nothing that brings it like, and we've seen this firsthand with a hockey team coming and starting, and you're bringing in millions of people a year. It's pretty fulfilling. It's pretty satisfying. And, it's a journey that I think we're super blessed to be on.
Yeah, and you've seen the other side of it too, right? With Oakland, for instance, with all those teams leaving, and then the struggles that urban city has had to go through when they don't have that same rock of a sports space. Ryan, thank you as always. Exciting time to be a Utah sports fan these days, in large part to the success you've had. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it, Alex. Happy to come on.